Hello everyone and welcome to Tech with Robert to get started with T-SQL course. In this lecture we're going to talk about the having clause, and I'm going to show quite a lot of examples to make sure that you guys really understand what the idea behind using the having clause is. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, give a thumbs up on the video if you like what I do. It really helps me to know what I do well and what you guys want me to improve on or focus more on in the future lectures. So without further ado, let's dive right in. So before we get started here, I just want to try to explain it sort of very simple. But let's say that I might as well just write a query. Let's just say that we're going to select from the fact internet sales, okay? And don't worry if you don't understand this about joins now. In the next upcoming lectures, we're going to talk a lot more about joins, but I'm going to use a join here. So I'm going to do an inner join against the dim sales territory. Sales territory key is equal to this. And I'm going to select the sales territory group and the sales territory country like this, and then we're going to sum the sales amount from the fact internet sales, and I'm going to name it total sales amount. Okay, I'm going to group it by these two, and we're going to order by 1 and 2. So as we can see here, when we run this query, we are summarizing all of the sales amount across the continent, the sales territory group, and the sales territory country. And both the where clause and the having clause is used to apply filters to the data in your query, but there's two different types of filters. So in the where clause, you're applying a filter, and then you're applying the aggregate function, your summarization, for example. But when you are filtering with the having clause, you are applying a filter on the already aggregated result, if that makes sense. So what I mean by that is, let's say that we have, okay, so we see the sales here for Europe, France, and then for Europe, Germany, Europe, United Kingdom, North America, Canada, United States, and then Australia, for example, okay? And so if I were to apply a filter here in the where clause, if let's say we want to select all the sales for all the countries in Europe, we could apply that. We know how to do that. We would simply just add a where clause, and we would say where the sales territory group is equal to Europe, right? So now we only get these 3 countries. But the thing here is that what if we wanted to, you see here we have 2.6 million and say 2.8 million here in Germany, and then in United Kingdom is the only country where we have above 3 million. So what if we wanted to apply a filter to only select the countries where the sum of the sales amount is higher than or equal to 3 million? So that is kind of the difference between the where clause and the having clause, is because when you're using the where clause, you're applying your filters and then you're aggregating the data. But with the having clause, you are applying a filter to the already aggregated data. So you see here, the data is already aggregated. It's already summarized to country for all of the countries in Europe. But then if we wanted to apply another filter to say that, okay, but we only want to see the countries where the total sales amount is equal to or above 3 million, we could not use that. We cannot apply that filter with a where clause. So that is sort of why the having clause was introduced in SQL. So if we wanted to apply that filter, let me just copy this query here. Actually, just take away this so we see it in 3 steps. So here was just the first query, and here is when we selected Europe. And now if I copy this query again, we see, so between the group by, the having clause always comes right after the group by. So we're grouping something and then we're using the having clause. So here we could say having, and we could say that the sum of the sales amount is going to be, it needs to be larger than or equal to 3 million. So we can say 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then now when we run this query, we see that we will only get United Kingdom, because the difference is here in this query here, we said that, let me just actually run all of these three at the same time. You see here we just said, okay, we want to select the continent, the sales territory group, and the country. And then we want to say this the total sales amount. And then the first filter we did is we wanted to filter on Europe. So that went into the where clause. But you see the numbers were still the same. The aggregate numbers were still the same. So we didn't apply any filter to the already aggregated numbers. We just put a filter on the where clause to what we wanted to see in our query before we did the aggregation. And so then further we wanted to apply a filter on the already aggregated data. That is when we had to use the having clause here. So here we said that give us all of the total sales here for all of the countries in Europe, and then apply a filter to only take the countries where the sales amount is equal to or bigger than 3 million, and that left us with only United Kingdom. So that is the difference between the different types of filters. So having is used to filter already aggregated data, where the filter in the where clause is used to filter what we want to see before we do the aggregation. I hope that makes sense. I'm going to show a couple of more examples here, some of more simple, just to get a feeling what the having clause really does. So let's say, for example, if we look at the customer table, we see we have a field that is called total children, and then we could count, start here and say number of customers. Then we need to group that by the total children, and we can order it by 1. And so here we see that we have 5,165 customers who has 0 children. We have 3,619 customers who has 1 children, and so on. And so now when we wanted to say, okay, but how many customers, we only want to see those who has more than 3,000 customers. So then the same thing here, we could use after the group by, we say having count star is above 3,000. And so when we write that query, we should only get these 3 rows here, because we see here we have 1.4k, 2.3k, 2.1k, and the only thing that is above 3,000 is the customers with 0, 1, or 2 children. So we should only get those 3 top rows here, and we get that what is expected. So we have filtered here and said after the aggregation we only want to say, okay, but now when we've done the aggregation, we want to apply another filter to further filter down the rows, and then say where the count is more than 3,000. Another example of it is, let's say that we can also use sort of an interval filter. So let's say that we look at our fact internet sales table again, and here we say we want the customer key and we want to count the sales order number. Okay, and we group it by the customer key, and then we apply a filter. So we say the having count sales order number, and this is what I mean by interval, because we could say that it should be higher, more than or equal to 50, and then we can apply and or clauses here. So we can say and count sales order number is going to be less than or equal to 60, and we can say order by, we want to order by 2 desk here. So now when we run this query, we see here that actually let me just on that. So we see we have this customer here has this many sales, and this customer here has 10 sales orders. But we wanted to say we only want to select all of the customers who has between 50 and 60 sales orders. When we run that, we see that we only have these 9 customers here. So this customer has placed 60 orders, and this customer has placed 59 orders, this one 58, and so on. And the last example I want to show you is, so now we have worked with the having clause, but we have hard coded, we have specified 3000 here, so, or 50 here. So these are static values. What if we wanted to apply a having clause but work with dynamic numbers? So let's just say that we can say, if we look in the from, let's say, dim reseller, okay, and in this table, if we look at the resellers table here, we have a field here called annual sales, okay, and then we also have annual revenue. And so what if we wanted to sort of summarize, we want to say for each of these resellers, we want to summarize the annual revenue, but we only want to see the resellers who has more than the average annual revenue. So what we could do is, we could see here that, okay, we could say we want to select the average annual revenue like this, and we say name it average annual revenue, and that number is, we can do a comment here, and we can take this and copy this value here. So it's 158,473, and then we could say, okay, so now we can say select star from the dim reseller. We can say we want the reseller name and the sum of the annual revenue, and that is annual revenue. We group it by the reseller name. Here we say, okay, so we say we want to select, if we run this query, we see that we have all of these resellers here and their annual revenue, but we wanted to only select all of the resellers where the sum of the annual revenue is larger than the average revenue. So we could say, okay, having the sum of the annual revenue is supposed to be bigger than, and we can copy this number here, and we say having the sum of the annual revenue should be higher than this number, because that is the average that we got from the query above. So when we write this query, we see we get a 204 rows, but this is still static. We had to write 2 queries in order to get this number. So what if we wanted to write this with only one single query? Then what we could do is, if we just copy that, we could say the sum of the annual revenue is supposed to be larger than, and then we can write a subquery, a select statement. So we want to do this query, and we want to have that inside our having. So it's always going to be dynamic. So when we add data, or that average revenue changes, we will always calculate that dynamically. So we could say here, and then we need to, I like to create a new row here, whether we can open and closing parentheses, and inside here we can write a select statement. So here we could write the exact same statement here. We could select this average number here, instead of doing it in 2 steps, and then we can say we order by 2 in ascending order. So now we see that in our having clause we are using a dynamic select statement. So we haven't specified statically that we want this number, so we didn't have to do it in 2 queries, but we can do it all in 1 query now. I see this would also return 204 rows. So this is the exact same thing, but now it's more dynamic. So hopefully you guys can have seen that knowing how to work with the having clause introduces the possibility to work with some pretty complex queries and analysis. So I hope you enjoyed this lecture. In the upcoming lectures, we're going to introduce the concept of join and how to join tables together. So I will see you guys in the next lecture.